"You must be mistaken," Claire Whitmore said softly, her smile as thin and cold as polished steel. "First class isn't a waiting room for people who wandered in from somewhere less refined." She tilted her head, studying Marcus and Elena as though they were stains on silk. "You see, this cabin is curated, like fine art, and not every frame belongs in a gallery." Her gaze hardened. "Some people mistake a ticket for belonging, but a seat doesn't grant dignity any more than costume jewelry makes someone royalty." She leaned closer, voice dropping to a whisper sharp as a blade. "Please don't force me to correct an embarrassment that should have corrected itself." Marcus Vance, 42, a tall black man with warm brown skin and calm, observant eyes, stood quietly beside his seat in the first-class cabin. He wore a tailored but understated charcoal suit, his posture composed, his demeanor dignified. Beside him, Elena Vance, 39, a poised black woman with deep ebony skin and an elegant simplicity in her cream blouse and dark coat, met Claire's gaze with steady restraint. Claire Whitmore, 34, white, immaculate in her navy uniform and silver wingpin, carried herself with the polished authority of someone who believed she embodied the prestige of the airline itself. Her voice, smooth and controlled, commanded attention in the hushed luxury of the commercial airline's premium cabin. "I beg your pardon," Marcus replied evenly, presenting his boarding pass. "Our tickets are valid." Claire accepted the document with gloved fingers, examining it as though it might soil her hands. "Yes," she said coolly, "they are technically valid, though sometimes mistakes slip through even the most meticulous systems." Elena's voice remained calm but firm. "We selected these seats weeks ago. If there's a concern, we'd appreciate clarification." Claire's smile tightened. "Clarification?" she repeated, her tone rising just enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Of course, we simply aim to maintain the standard of this cabin." A businessman across the aisle looked up from his newspaper, his gaze lingering with open curiosity. Another passenger glanced at Marcus and Elena, then at Claire, as if awaiting confirmation of an unspoken suspicion. Claire handed back the boarding pass with deliberate slowness. "Please remain seated," she said. "We will verify your documentation again, in accordance with airline policy." Marcus exchanged a quiet glance with Elena before taking his seat. The humiliation was subtle, but unmistakable, a public suggestion that their presence required justification. Moments later, a junior flight attendant approached with a silver tray of champagne flutes. She offered drinks to the surrounding passengers with warm enthusiasm, her smile radiant. When she reached Marcus and Elena, she hesitated, glancing toward Claire for instruction. Claire gave the faintest shake of her head. The attendant moved on. Elena's brows lifted slightly. "Excuse me," she said gently, addressing the attendant. "We were skipped." Claire's voice cut in before the young woman could respond. "Service will be provided at our discretion, ma'am. We are prioritizing guests who are accustomed to the pace of first-class travel." The words hung in the air like smoke. A man seated nearby cleared his throat. "I suppose they're just making sure everything's appropriate," he muttered, not quite quietly enough. Another passenger nodded in agreement. Marcus remained composed, his hands folded neatly in his lap. "We understand procedures," he said calmly, "but we also understand passenger rights." Claire's expression hardened, though her smile remained intact. "Of course you do, Mr. Vance, and I assure you we are acting entirely within them." Elena's gaze swept the cabin, noting the curious stares and whispered exchanges. "Then perhaps you could explain why we've been singled out." Claire's reply came smoothly, almost rehearsed. "No one is being singled out, Mrs. Vance. We simply uphold the expectations of this environment. First class represents a certain level of comfort for all our guests." The implication was unmistakable. A ripple of quiet agreement moved through the cabin, subtle but suffocating. Marcus sensed it instantly, the careful choreography of suspicion, the quiet alignment of authority and perception. This was not improvisation. It was performance. He leaned slightly toward Elena, his voice low. "Do you feel that?" he murmured. She nodded faintly. "Yes, it feels Prepared? Claire turned away, issuing instructions to another crew member in hushed tones. The purser approached, nodding as Claire spoke. A junior attendant began typing notes into a handheld device, glancing intermittently toward Marcus and Elena. Marcus's eyes narrowed, not with anger, but with recognition. This was no misunderstanding. It was orchestration. The aircraft door closed with a soft, final thud. Engines hummed to life, and the cabin lights dimmed to a warm glow. Around them, champagne glasses clinked, and quiet laughter resumed, as though nothing had happened. Yet the air felt heavier now. Elena folded her hands neatly in her lap, her dignity unshaken. "Whatever this is," she whispered, "it isn't accidental." Marcus nodded slowly, his calm gaze drifting toward Claire as she resumed her poised stance at the front of the cabin. "No," he said quietly, "it isn't." Across the aisle, a passenger leaned toward another and whispered something inaudible. The junior attendant continued typing, her expression tense. Claire's eyes met Marcus's for a fleeting moment. Cool, confident, certain of control. And in that instant, Marcus understood. This was not simply prejudice. It was a script. "Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Matthew 5:10. Marcus lowered his gaze briefly, the words echoing in silent resolve. Dignity, he knew, did not require applause. It required endurance. If you have ever been judged by appearance rather than truth, then what happens next with Marcus and Elena will make you question everything you thought you knew about power and dignity. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and stay with Black Resilient Stories to follow their journey toward justice. As the aircraft climbs into the night sky, the crew's quiet alliance begins to form, and Marcus realizes the humiliation was only the first move in a carefully planned design. The aircraft climbed steadily into the night sky, its engines humming with quiet authority as New York's glittering skyline faded into darkness. Inside the first-class cabin, the atmosphere remained polished and serene. On the surface, crystal glassware shimmered beneath soft lighting, and hushed conversations drifted like distant music. Beneath that elegance, however, an invisible shift had begun. Claire Whitmore moved gracefully down the aisle, her posture immaculate, her navy uniform flawless. She poured vintage champagne for a silver-haired couple near the window, her laughter warm and effortless. The surrounding passengers responded with smiles and gratitude, basking in the attention that defined the luxury of a commercial airline's premium service. When Claire approached Marcus and Elena's row, her warmth vanished. She paused, letting silence linger, then turned away without acknowledging them. Elena lifted her chin slightly. "Excuse me," she said gently, her voice poised and controlled. "We haven't received service yet." Claire stopped and turned back slowly. Her smile returned, thin and rehearsed. "Service will arrive in due course, Mrs. Vance," she replied. "We are ensuring that the experience remains consistent with the expectations of this cabin." Marcus folded his hands calmly. "Consistency is precisely what we're requesting." Claire inclined her head as if indulging a child. "Of course. We appreciate your patience while we attend to guests who are accustomed to the flow of first-class travel." The implications settled heavily in the air. Across the aisle, a middle-aged businessman lowered his newspaper, his gaze lingering on Marcus and Elena. "Standards are important," he muttered, his voice low but audible. "One expects a certain atmosphere in first class." Claire offered him a gracious nod. "We strive to provide exactly that, sir." A woman in pearls leaned toward her companion. "It's not about exclusion," she whispered, though everyone nearby could hear. "It's about comfort." Claire did not challenge the comment. Instead, she absorbed it, allowing the sentiment to settle like an unspoken verdict. Elena straightened. "We value comfort as well," she said calmly. "That's why we selected these seats." Claire's smile sharpened. "And we appreciate that, Mrs. Vance. However, when multiple guests express concern, we are obligated to respond in accordance with airline policy." Marcus's gaze sharpened. "Concern about what exactly?" Claire clasped her hands before her. "Atmosphere, Mr. Vance. Perception. Maintaining harmony within the cabin." The words were deliberately vague. Impossible to challenge, yet unmistakably pointed. A junior flight attendant approached, holding a handheld device. She hesitated beside Claire, her eyes flickering nervously between the couple and her superior. "Yes?" Claire prompted. I'm logging the service." "Sequence," the attendant replied softly. Claire nodded approvingly. "Please ensure the record reflects all interactions accurately." Marcus noticed the glowing timestamp on the device as the attendant began typing. The entry appeared before any disturbance had occurred. "Elena," he murmured quietly. "She's documenting this." Elena's expression remained composed. "Before anything has happened." Claire turned back toward them. "Is there a problem, Mr. Vance?" "Not at all," Marcus replied evenly. "We simply wish to understand the nature of the concern." Claire's voice softened, almost sympathetic. "Some guests have expressed discomfort. It is our responsibility to address those concerns professionally." The businessman across the aisle cleared his throat. "Nothing personal," he said, avoiding Marcus's gaze. "Just preserving the integrity of the cabin." Elena regarded him steadily. "Integrity is preserved through fairness, sir." A flicker of unease crossed his face, but he said nothing more. Claire stepped closer, her tone gentle but firm. "Mrs. Vance, we are not questioning your right to travel. We are simply ensuring that all guests feel at ease. It's a delicate balance." Marcus's voice remained calm, though it carried quiet authority. Balance should not come at the expense of dignity. For a moment, the cabin fell silent. Claire's smile tightened imperceptibly. "Of course not, Mr. Vance. And I assure you, we are acting entirely within passenger rights and company guidelines." She gestured subtly to the junior attendant, who continued typing. A tall passenger seated nearby leaned forward. "If there's a disturbance, perhaps it should be addressed sooner rather than later," he suggested politely. Claire inclined her head. "Thank you for your understanding, sir." The words were carefully chosen, each reinforcing an invisible alliance. Marcus watched as Claire moved down the aisle to confer quietly with the purser. Their conversation was hushed but purposeful. The purser nodded several times, glancing toward Marcus and Elena before speaking into a discreet headset. Elena exhaled slowly. "They're building something," she whispered. "Yes," Marcus replied softly. "And it's happening faster than it should." Moments later, the junior attendant returned with a silver tray, serving meals to surrounding passengers with bright professionalism. When she reached Marcus and Elena, she hesitated again, looking toward Claire for instruction. Claire gave the faintest shake of her head. The attendant moved on. Elena's composure remained unbroken, though her fingers tightened slightly. "We've now been skipped twice," she said quietly. Marcus nodded. "Please note the time." The attendant glanced back, conflicted. After a moment's hesitation, she discreetly adjusted her device and logged another entry. Claire returned, her expression serene. "Mr. and Mrs. Vance," she said gently, "we are addressing the situation with the utmost professionalism. Your cooperation will ensure a smooth journey for everyone." "Our cooperation?" Marcus repeated calmly. Claire's smile remained fixed. "Harmony within the cabin benefits all guests." A ripple of quiet agreement moved through the surrounding seats. Encouraged by Claire's authority, the passengers settled into silent consensus. Marcus leaned back slowly, his gaze thoughtful. "Elena," he said quietly, "do you notice the pattern?" She nodded faintly. "Yes. Complaints first. Documentation second. Justification third." Claire overheard the last words and paused, her eyes narrowing slightly before her composure returned. "We are simply following procedure," she said. "That is our responsibility on a commercial airline of this caliber." Marcus met her gaze without hostility. "And ours," he replied, "is to observe." For the briefest moment, uncertainty flickered in Claire's eyes, gone almost instantly. She turned away, signaling the purser once more. The junior attendant continued typing, her hands trembling. The businessman folded his newspaper with deliberate finality. The woman in pearls whispered softly to her companion. One by one, the passengers aligned themselves with Claire's narrative, their silent approval forming an invisible wall around Marcus and Elena. The aircraft leveled off at cruising altitude. Outside, the sky stretched endlessly, a dark ocean beneath scattered stars. Inside the cabin, the alliance was complete. Elena leaned slightly toward Marcus, her voice steady but low. "This isn't about service anymore." "No," Marcus replied softly, his eyes fixed on Claire as she stood poised at the front of the cabin. "It's about control." Across the aisle, the junior attendant glanced up from her device, her expression tense. On the screen, a new entry appeared, time-stamped and sealed. Marcus's gaze lingered on the device. "They're writing the story," he murmured. Elena nodded. "Before the truth has a chance to speak." At the front of the cabin, Claire exchanged a quiet, knowing nod with the purser. The gesture was subtle but unmistakable, a signal of alignment, of agreement, of intent. Marcus felt a chill settle beneath his calm exterior. This was no longer a misunderstanding. It was a case file in motion. The aircraft cruised at 35,000 feet, gliding through the silent darkness above the Atlantic. Inside the first-class cabin, the atmosphere was tranquil, soft lighting, crystal glassware, and quiet conversation. Yet beneath the polished calm, tension lingered like an invisible current. Marcus Vance sat upright in his seat, composed and observant, his warm brown eyes steady as he watched the subtle choreography unfolding around him. Beside him, Elena remained poised, her dignity intact, though her silence spoke volumes. The air between them carried an unspoken understanding. This was no longer about service. It was about control. Claire Whitmore approached with deliberate grace, her heels clicking softly against the aisle. She paused beside their seats, her expression serene yet distant. "Mr. and Mrs. Vance," she said gently, her voice pitched just loud enough for surrounding passengers to hear. "We've received multiple concerns from guests regarding the atmosphere in this cabin." Elena looked up calmly. "Concerns about what exactly?" Claire's smile remained fixed. "Perception, Mrs. Vance. Maintaining harmony is essential in first class." Marcus met her gaze evenly. "Harmony is preserved through fairness, not assumptions." Claire's eyes hardened almost imperceptibly. "Nevertheless, we must act in accordance with airline policy to ensure the comfort of all passengers." A murmur stirred nearby. The businessman across the aisle folded his newspaper with deliberate precision. "I must say," he remarked quietly, "this cabin feels different tonight." Another passenger nodded. "It's unfortunate, but standards exist for a reason." Claire inclined her head, acknowledging their support without openly endorsing their words. "We appreciate your understanding," she said smoothly. Elena straightened slightly. "We have complied with every instruction and exercised our passenger rights respectfully. On what grounds are we being questioned?" Claire clasped her hands before her. "Your presence and behavior have created discomfort among several guests. As lead flight attendant, it is my responsibility to address such concerns." Marcus's voice remained calm, though it carried quiet authority. "Discomfort is not justification for discrimination." A ripple of unease moved through the cabin. Claire's smile thinned. "Mr. Vance, we are not engaging in discrimination. We are ensuring a peaceful environment. To resolve this matter discreetly, we ask that you relocate to premium economy." The words landed like a verdict. Elena's expression remained composed, but her eyes flashed with quiet resolve. "We decline. We selected these seats lawfully and will remain where we belong." Claire's posture stiffened. Refusal to comply with crew instructions constitutes a violation of airline protocol. Marcus leaned forward slightly, his tone measured. "We have complied with every reasonable request. We simply ask to be treated with dignity." The surrounding passengers watched in silence, their curiosity sharpened into judgment. A woman in pearls whispered to her companion, her voice barely concealed. "Why would they resist if they have nothing to hide?" The businessman added quietly, "Crew judgment should be respected." Claire nodded subtly, as though supported by the cabin itself. She stepped aside and spoke into her headset. "Purser, please assist in resolving a passenger compliance issue in first class." Within moments, the purser arrived, his expression professional yet guarded. He listened as Claire summarized the situation, her words polished and precise, each phrase crafted to portray calm authority. The purser turned to Marcus and Elena. "Sir, ma'am, we request your cooperation. Please gather your belongings and relocate." Elena's voice remained steady. "On what written policy are we being removed?" The purser hesitated briefly. Claire answered, before he could respond. "For the comfort and safety of all guests," she said firmly. "We are acting within our authority." Marcus rose slowly, his towering presence commanding quiet attention without aggression. "Then please document that we are being removed without cause." A hush fell over the cabin. Claire's smile tightened. "Security will meet us upon landing if necessary. However, we hope you will comply voluntarily." Elena stood beside Marcus, her composure unwavering. "We will not surrender our dignity for your convenience." Claire's voice hardened, stripped of pretense. "Very well. For the integrity of this commercial airline, we will proceed accordingly." She signaled discreetly. Moments later, 2 uniformed security officers entered the cabin from the forward galley, their presence casting a shadow over the otherwise elegant environment. Gasps rippled through the passengers. Phones appeared discreetly in trembling hands, capturing fragments of the unfolding scene. The purser stepped forward. "Sir, ma'am, please cooperate." Marcus exchanged a quiet glance with Elena before gathering his coat with deliberate calm. "We will comply," he said softly. "Not because we are wrong, but because dignity does not require force." Elena nodded, her chin lifted with quiet strength. As they stepped into the aisle, the cabin fell silent. Passengers watched with a mixture of curiosity, discomfort, and unspoken judgment. Claire stood poised at the front, her expression composed, as though order had been restored. Marcus and Elena walked past rows of gleaming seats, their measured footsteps echoing through the cabin like a solemn procession. No one spoke, no one intervened, yet their dignity remained unbroken. As they reached the curtains separating first class from premium economy, Elena paused briefly, turning her gaze back toward the silent witnesses. Her voice, though soft, carried with unmistakable clarity. "Remember this moment," she said, "not because of what we lost, but because of what was revealed." They stepped beyond the curtain. The division closed behind them with a whisper. Inside first class, conversation slowly resumed. Glasses clinked. Laughter returned in uneasy fragments. Claire adjusted her uniform and resumed service with polished efficiency, her authority unquestioned. To the cabin, the disturbance had ended. To Marcus and Elena, it had only begun. They took their new seats in silence, the hum of the aircraft surrounding them like a distant storm. Marcus folded his hands, his calm gaze fixed ahead. "Elena?" he murmured quietly. "Did you notice the timing?" She nodded faintly. "The documentation began before the complaints." He allowed himself a faint, knowing smile. "Then this wasn't prejudice alone." "No," she replied softly. "It was preparation." The aircraft continued its steady course across the Atlantic, carrying with it the quiet weight of injustice. The Lord is a refuge for the oppressed, a stronghold in times of trouble. Psalm 9:9. Elena closed her eyes briefly, the words settling like a shield around her spirit. Though humiliated before strangers, she felt no shame, only clarity. Marcus leaned back, his expression serene. "Truth," he whispered, "does not need permission to rise." As the night deepens and the flight presses on toward London, the incident is quietly sealed into official records. But somewhere beyond the cabin walls, forces are already stirring, reviewing reports, questioning timelines, and searching for the truth hidden behind polished procedure. 48 hours later, the transatlantic flight had already faded from public memory. But inside the corporate headquarters of Northbridge Atlantic Airways in London, the incident refused to disappear. The glass-walled executive tower stood gleaming beneath a gray morning sky, its polished corridors humming with quiet urgency. Screens flickered with operational data, compliance reports, and investor briefings. Yet, beneath the routine rhythm of aviation business, a single file had begun to circulate. Classified, flagged, and expedited. Flight NA217, Customer Disruption Incident. The title alone carried the power to shape a narrative. Inside a private conference room, Claire Whitmore sat upright, her Navy uniform replaced by a tailored cream suit. Her posture remained impeccable, her expression calm. Across from her, a compliance officer and a representative from airline legal reviewed digital reports projected onto a sleek screen. "Your written statement aligns with the purser's testimony," the compliance officer said, scrolling through the document. "You acted in accordance with airline policy to preserve cabin harmony." Claire inclined her head modestly. "I followed procedure, as required on a commercial airline of this caliber. The comfort and safety of our passengers must always come first." The legal representative nodded. "We'll finalize the internal record within 24 hours. Once sealed, the report will stand as the official account." Claire's lips curved into a faint, satisfied smile. Sealed. The word lingered like a quiet victory. Across the city, in a discreet private office overlooking the Thames, Marcus and Elena Vance sat in composed silence. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating a conference table scattered with documents, tablets, and encrypted communications. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his calm demeanor unshaken. "They're moving quickly," he said. "Faster than standard review." "Protocols?" Elena nodded, her gaze steady. "Because they intend to close the narrative before anyone questions it." A secure line chimed softly. Marcus answered without hesitation. "Vance." A measured voice responded. "Mr. Vance, this is Daniel Reeves from the board's compliance advisory panel. I trust your journey was, eventful." Marcus allowed himself a faint smile. "Eventful is one word for it." Reeves exhaled quietly. "The airline has initiated an accelerated internal review. They're sealing statements and restricting access to service logs. If the file is finalized, challenging their version will become significantly more difficult." Elena leaned forward. "Are there prior complaints?" A brief pause followed. "Yes," Reeves admitted. "Several. Each was resolved internally, quietly. The language is always the same. Guest comfort, crew discretion, premium environment, but none of the cases were ever fully investigated." Marcus's eyes darkened with understanding. "So the pattern exists." "And it disappears," Reeves replied. "Every time." Silence settled over the room. Elena exchanged a glance with Marcus. "Then the truth isn't in their statements," she said softly. "It's in their omissions." Reeves hesitated before continuing. "There is one avenue. The raw service sequence data. Timestamps showing who was served, when, and in what order. If those records remain intact, they will reveal whether the incident was manufactured." Marcus's expression sharpened. "Where are the logs stored?" "In the airline's operational archive," Reeves replied. "But access is restricted, and I have reason to believe someone is attempting to sanitize the data." Elena's voice was quiet but resolute. "Then we don't have time." "Exactly," Reeves said. "Once the report is sealed, the narrative becomes institutional truth." The call ended. Marcus folded his hands. Thoughtfully. "They believe silence will protect them." Elena's gaze remained steady. "Silence never protects injustice. It only delays its exposure." Back at Northbridge Atlantic headquarters, the atmosphere intensified. In a dimly lit operations office, a junior crew scheduler stared anxiously at a computer screen displaying service sequence logs from Flight NA217. Rows of timestamps flickered in precise order, records of beverage service, meal delivery, and passenger interactions. Behind him stood a senior customer experience manager, her tone low and urgent. "These entries need to be reviewed," she said. "Ensure the report reflects the crew's official statement. We cannot afford discrepancies." The scheduler swallowed hard. "But the logs show that Mr. and Mrs. Vance were skipped before any complaint was recorded." The manager's gaze hardened. "Then verify that the sequence aligns with the final report. Accuracy is essential." Her meaning was unmistakable. The scheduler hesitated, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. Understood. As she left the room, he exhaled shakily, his conscience warring with fear. That evening, Marcus and Elena stood quietly on a balcony overlooking the river. London's skyline shimmered beneath the twilight sky, its lights reflecting like scattered stars upon the water. "Elena," Marcus said softly, "they are sealing the record to protect themselves." She nodded, her voice calm. "And in doing so, they reveal what they fear most." He turned toward her, his expression serene yet resolute. "We cannot win by outrage, only by truth." Elena closed her eyes briefly, drawing strength from stillness. "For nothing is hidden that will not be disclosed, nor concealed that will not be brought out into the open." Luke 8:17. She opened her eyes, the verse settling like a promise. "Then we will let the truth reveal itself," she said quietly. Marcus smiled faintly. At the moment. The following morning, the internal report was prepared for final authorization. Digital signatures awaited confirmation, and the classification label, Confidential Incident Resolution, glowed on the screen. In her office, Claire Whitmore reviewed the document with quiet satisfaction. The narrative was precise, polished, and unquestioned. It portrayed her actions as measured, professional, and justified. She leaned back in her chair, confident that the matter was resolved. The record would be sealed, and with it, the truth buried. But elsewhere in the city, Marcus and Elena prepared to act. Encrypted files appeared on their tablet, fragments of internal communication, hints of prior complaints, and a single data trail pointing toward the missing service logs. Elena studied the information carefully. "The key exists," she said. Marcus nodded slowly. "But the final piece is still missing." He looked out over the river, his reflection merging with the city lights. "They believe this story belongs to them," he murmured. Elena's voice was steady. "Then we will remind them that truth belongs to no one. If you have ever been silenced by authority or watched truth disappear behind polished procedures, then what happens next, with Marcus and Elena, will leave you breathless. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with Black Resilient Stories to witness how dignity confronts power. As the sealed report nears final approval, a hidden data trail begins to surface, one that threatens to unravel the airline's narrative. But someone inside the system is already moving to erase it. Rain traced silver lines down the glass facade of Northbridge Atlantic Airways headquarters, blurring the London skyline beyond. Inside the operations wing, fluorescent lights hummed above rows of monitors displaying flight paths, compliance reports, and service sequence logs. The atmosphere was quiet but charged, as if the building itself understood that something delicate and dangerous was unfolding within its walls. Daniel Hargrove sat alone at his terminal, his reflection pale against the glow of the screen. At 28, he had built his career on precision and obedience, believing that professionalism meant loyalty to the system he served. Tonight, that belief trembled. On the monitor before him flickered the service sequence logs from Flight NA217. Each timestamp told a silent story. Champagne delivered to neighboring passengers, meals served in perfect sequence, cabin requests fulfilled with meticulous care. Except for one glaring omission. Marcus and Elena Vance had been bypassed before any complaint had been recorded. Daniel leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly as the weight of the discovery settled upon him. The implication was unmistakable. The narrative of passenger discomfort had been constructed after the fact. What had occurred in the first-class cabin was not merely an incident. It was orchestration. The door opened quietly behind him. "Have you completed the revision, Mr. Hargrove?" asked Victoria Langley, Director of Customer Experience. She entered with measured confidence, her tailored navy suit immaculate, her presence commanding without raising her voice. Her gaze swept over the screen before settling on Daniel. He hesitated. "The logs show the Vances were bypassed before any complaint was recorded. If I alter the sequence, it will contradict the original timestamps." Victoria stepped closer, her heels echoing softly across the polished floor. "You are not altering the truth," she replied coolly. "You are ensuring consistency with the official report. Discrepancies create confusion, and confusion damages the brand. Her eyes hardened. Accuracy protects the airline. Loyalty protects your career. Daniel swallowed, his fingers hovering uncertainly above the keyboard. Yes, ma'am. She offered a thin smile. Ensure nothing remains that could be misinterpreted. The company's reputation depends on it. As she left, silence returned, heavy and suffocating. Daniel stared at the blinking cursor. One command would erase the evidence. One keystroke would bury the truth. He reopened the service logs, reviewing each entry with painstaking care. The pattern was undeniable. Marcus and Elena had been denied service before any complaint existed. The justification had been manufactured after the humiliation: integrity or survival, truth or obedience. His hands trembled. Across the Thames, Marcus and Elena Vance sat in a private compliance office overlooking the river. The city lights shimmered beyond tall windows, their reflections dancing across the water like fractured stars. Elena studied an encrypted tablet displaying fragments of internal communication. They've sealed the narrative, she said quietly, and they're preparing to erase anything that contradicts it. Marcus nodded, his expression calm but resolute. Then we are not facing a review. We are facing a cover-up. A secure call chimed softly. Marcus answered. Vance? Daniel Reeves, came the measured voice of their compliance advisor. We've confirmed internal pressure on the operations archive. Someone is attempting to sanitize the service sequence logs. Elena leaned forward. Do we have access? Not directly, Reeves replied. But there's a junior scheduler, Daniel Hargrove. He's been tasked with reconciling the data. If anyone holds the final piece, it's him. Marcus's gaze sharpened. And his motive? Fear, Reeves said, quietly. Fear of losing everything. Elena exchanged a thoughtful glance with Marcus. Fear can silence truth, she said softly, but it can also awaken conscience. Back at headquarters, Daniel remained alone in the operations office. The glow of the monitor illuminated his face as he hovered over the command prompt. The system awaited his decision. He remembered the airline's code of ethics displayed during his training. Integrity is the foundation of trust. The words echoed hollowly now. A notification appeared on the screen, an encrypted compliance message requesting archive verification. Curious, Daniel opened it. Truth does not threaten integrity, only deception does. He frowned, reading the message again. A second line appeared beneath it. The Lord is a refuge for the oppressed, a stronghold in times of trouble. Psalm 9:9. Daniel swallowed hard. The verse stirred something deep within him, a quiet voice he had tried to ignore. He leaned back in his chair, breathing slowly. They're not just covering a mistake, he whispered. They're rewriting reality. The cursor blinked patiently, awaiting his command. For a long moment, Daniel sat motionless. Then, with trembling resolve, he accessed the secure archive and copied the unaltered service logs onto an encrypted external drive. The progress bar advanced silently, each percentage marking an act of quiet defiance. When the transfer was complete, he removed the drive and slipped it into his jacket pocket. For the first time that night, his hands were steady. Elsewhere in the building, Victoria Langley convened a discreet meeting with legal and public relations executives. Claire Whitmore sat beside her, composed and confident, her posture immaculate. The narrative remains intact, Victoria said, addressing the room. The report reflects a routine customer disruption incident managed in accordance with airline policy. The airline's legal counsel nodded. Once sealed, the report becomes the official record. Any external challenge will lack standing. Claire folded her hands neatly. I acted to preserve the integrity of this commercial airline and the comfort of its passengers. I stand by my actions. A PR executive added, if necessary, the Vances will be portrayed as difficult passengers exploiting perceived bias to leverage influence. Claire's smile was faint, but satisfied. Then the matter is resolved. Yet beneath the polished confidence, uncertainty lingered, unspoken but unmistakable. Across the river, Marcus's tablet chimed softly. A new file appeared. Service sequence log, Flight Na 217, unaltered. Elena's breath caught. "It's him," she whispered. Marcus opened the document, scanning the entries with calm precision. A faint smile touched his lips. "The truth survives." Elena nodded, her voice steady. "And with it, the system's weakness." Marcus leaned back, his gaze thoughtful. "Fear created. The cover-up. Courage will expose it." She met his eyes. "What happens now?" He allowed himself a quiet smile. "Now we let them believe they've won." Elena's lips curved into a knowing expression. "A false victory." "Yes," he said softly. "And when the time is right, we reveal everything." Morning light spread gently across London, dissolving the rain clouds and illuminating the city in pale gold. Inside Northbridge Atlantic headquarters, confidence returned as executives circulated the sealed incident report. The crisis, they believed, had been contained. Claire Whitmore resumed her duties with renewed composure, her reputation publicly affirmed. Victoria Langley watched the internal communications with quiet satisfaction, convinced the matter had been resolved. But across the river, Marcus and Elena stood by the window, overlooking the awakening city. "They believe they buried the truth," Elena said softly. Marcus nodded, his expression serene. "They buried their own defense." Outside, the clouds parted, revealing a clear morning sky. The erasure window had closed, but the reckoning had only begun. Morning sunlight streamed across the glass facade of Northbridge Atlantic Airways headquarters, casting reflections over the Thames. Inside the executive briefing room, an air of restored confidence settled over the leadership team. A polished statement glowed on screens throughout the building. Official notice, Incident N. A 217 resolved. The airline affirms that all actions taken aboard flight NA 217 were conducted in accordance with airline policy and passenger safety protocols. Claire Whitmore stood near the window, her uniform immaculate, her posture poised. She read the statement with quiet satisfaction, the reflection of London's skyline gleaming behind her. Victoria Langley approached with a measured smile. "Congratulations, Claire. The board has reviewed the report. Your professionalism has been commended." Claire inclined her head modestly. "I merely upheld the standards of the first-class cabin and protected the reputation of this commercial airline," Victoria added. "The matter is closed." For a moment, the world appeared perfectly aligned in Claire's favor. Across the river, Marcus and Elena Vance sat in a private compliance office overlooking the city. The skyline shimmered beyond the tall windows, its quiet grandeur contrasting with the gravity of the moment. Marcus reviewed the encrypted service logs displayed on a tablet. His expression remained calm, but his eyes sharpened as he studied the timestamps and service sequences. "They've sealed their narrative," he said evenly, "but they overlooked one detail." Elena leaned closer. "The sequence." He nodded. "Every passenger was served, except us, and it happened before any complaint was recorded." A secure call chimed softly. Marcus answered. "Daniel Reeves," came the measured voice of the compliance advisor. "We've verified the logs. They contradict the official report. If released strategically, they will destabilize the airline's position. Without exposing your full leverage." Elena exchanged a quiet glance with Marcus. "A partial reveal," she said softly. "Exactly," Reeves replied. "Enough to raise doubt, not enough to reveal everything." Marcus closed the file, his expression composed. "Then we proceed." Within Northbridge Atlantic headquarters, a confidential memorandum circulated discreetly among senior leadership. The document contained a fragment of the original service sequence logs, unaltered, time-stamped, and undeniable. Unease spread quietly through the executive floor. Victoria Langley studied the data, her composure tightening. "This contradicts the incident report." A legal advisor frowned. "If these logs become public, our narrative will collapse." Claire Whitmore entered the room, her expression calm but alert. "Is there a problem?" Victoria turned the tablet toward her. "These logs show the Vances were bypassed before any complaint existed." For the first time, Claire's confidence faltered. That's impossible, she said quietly. I followed procedure. The legal advisor spoke carefully. If verified, this suggests a procedural inconsistency. We must address it immediately. Victoria's eyes hardened. We will, but we control the narrative. Rumors rippled through the airline's corridors. Compliance officers questioned the timeline. Analysts reviewed service protocols. Even members of the board began to inquire discreetly. In a private lounge, two executives spoke in hushed tones. If those logs are authentic, one said, the report is compromised. The other frowned. Then who authorized the revisions? Across the building, Claire stood alone beside a panoramic window. For the first time, uncertainty crept into her expression. They're testing us, she whispered. News of the discrepancy reached Marcus and Elena through their compliance advisor. The logs are circulating internally, Reeves reported. Leadership is questioning the report. You've shifted the balance. Elena exhaled slowly. So the truth is surfacing. Marcus allowed himself a faint smile. Only a fragment. Just enough. For the first time since the flight, hope stirred in the air. It appears we've won the first round, Elena said quietly. Marcus nodded. A necessary step. At headquarters, Victoria Langley convened an emergency strategy meeting with legal and public relations executives. We respond immediately, she said, her voice sharp with authority. Issue a clarification, emphasize passenger safety and crew discretion. A PR director nodded. We'll release a statement framing the Vances as confrontational passengers attempting to manipulate the situation. Claire's confidence returned, her voice steady. Their refusal to relocate disrupted the cabin. That is documented. Precisely, Victoria replied. We shift the narrative from service to safety. Within hours, a public statement was released. Northbridge Atlantic Airways statement. The airline stands by the professionalism of its crew. The passengers involved exhibited behavior that raised safety concerns, prompting appropriate action in accordance with company policy. The narrative shifted instantly. Media outlets echoed the statement. Commentators speculated. Online discourse twisted perception into doubt. Marcus's tablet chimed with the official release. He read the statement silently, his expression unreadable. Elena's eyes widened. They've reframed the incident. Marcus nodded slowly. They've weaponized perception. A secure call followed immediately. The airline has countered your reveal, Reeves said gravely. They've shifted the narrative to safety concerns. Public opinion is turning. Elena's voice tightened. They're portraying us as aggressors. Yes, Reeves replied. Your partial reveal has triggered their final defense. Silence filled the room. For a moment, it felt as though the victory had vanished. Marcus leaned back, his gaze steady. This was inevitable. Elena looked at him. You expected this? He nodded calmly. A false victory always invites a stronger counterstrike. Across London, news outlets repeated the airline's statement. Headlines questioned Marcus and Elena's intentions. Commentators debated whether the couple had exploited accusations of bias. Inside Northbridge Atlantic, confidence returned. Victoria Langley watched the media coverage with satisfaction. The narrative is restored, she said. The matter is contained. Claire Whitmore allowed herself a quiet smile. Order has been preserved. In their office overlooking the Thames, Marcus and Elena stood in silence, the city lights shimmering below. Elena, Marcus said softly, truth does not win by shouting. It wins through timing. She nodded, though the weight of public doubt pressed heavily upon her. Then we wait. He placed a reassuring hand over hers. For we walk by faith, not by sight. 2 Corinthians 5:7. Elena closed her eyes briefly, drawing strength from the words. They believe perception defines reality, she said quietly. Marcus's voice remained calm. But truth requires only patience. As evening settled over London, Northbridge Atlantic celebrated its restored reputation. Executives dispersed with renewed confidence, convinced the crisis had been neutralized. But across the river, Marcus and Elena prepared their next move. Elena studied the encrypted drive containing the unaltered records and hidden training guidance. They've revealed their final weapon. Marcus nodded. And now we know exactly how to dismantle it. She looked at him, her resolve unwavering. Then Scene 7 begins. Marcus's faint smile returned. Not yet. First, we let them believe they've won. Outside, the last light of day faded into night, casting long shadows across the Thames. The world believed the story had ended, but the truth was only gathering strength. The airline celebrates its restored image, confident the crisis has been contained. Yet hidden evidence, suppressed training directives, and a terrified insider hold the final piece of truth. The boardroom of Northbridge Atlantic Airways was silent, the kind of silence that carried weight rather than peace. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the London skyline, but the executives gathered around the polished mahogany table paid little attention to the view. Every seat was occupied: board members, legal counsel, compliance officers, and senior leadership. At the center of the table lay a sealed folder labeled Confidential Special Review Session. Victoria Langley sat poised at the head of the table, her composure immaculate. Claire Whitmore occupied a seat beside her, confident but alert, her posture reflecting the quiet authority she had come to embody. The airline's legal counsel cleared his throat, preparing to open the session. Before we proceed, he began, we have received a formal request for attendance from external stakeholders with a vested interest in Northbridge Atlantic Airways. Victoria's brow tightened slightly. External stakeholders? The conference room doors opened. Marcus and Elena Vance entered with calm, unhurried steps. Their presence commanded attention without spectacle. Marcus, tall and composed, wore a tailored charcoal suit, his expression serene. Elena, poised and resolute, walked beside him with quiet dignity. A ripple of confusion moved through the room. Victoria rose slowly. Mr. and Mrs. Vance, this is a private executive meeting. Marcus inclined his head politely. Indeed, Miss Langley, which is why we were invited. The legal counsel glanced at his notes, his expression shifting. Their credentials have been verified. They represent Vance Global Holdings. A murmur spread across the table. Claire's eyes narrowed slightly. And what interest does Vance Global Holdings have in this airline? Elena's voice was calm and unwavering. A controlling one. Silence fell like a sudden storm. Marcus placed a slender dossier on the table. Vance Global Holdings serves as a principal partner in the financial structure supporting Northbridge Atlantic's transatlantic fuel hedging and aircraft financing operations. Our firm maintains oversight authority through confidential governance provisions. Victoria's composure faltered for the first time. That is highly irregular. On the contrary, Marcus replied evenly, it is highly documented. The legal counsel reviewed the dossier, his expression draining of color. The documentation is authentic, he said quietly. Their firm holds controlling leverage over several of our critical financial agreements. The room fell silent. Claire Whitmore's confidence wavered. What does this have to do with the incident aboard flight NA-217? Elena met her gaze steadily. Everything. Marcus activated a tablet, projecting a sequence of documents onto the boardroom screen. Let us begin with the service sequence logs from flight NA-217, he said calmly. These records show that my wife and I were denied service in the first-class cabin before any passenger complaint was recorded. The timestamps appeared in stark clarity, each entry indisputable. Victoria leaned forward, her voice tense. Those logs were reconciled. Marcus's expression remained serene. Reconciled, yes, but not erased. He advanced the presentation. Next, we present internal communications from the Customer Experience Division. These documents reveal coordinated efforts to revise official records and align them with a predetermined narrative. Gasps echoed softly around the room. The legal counsel spoke cautiously. These communications indicate deliberate falsification. Claire's voice tightened. I acted in accordance with airline policy. I upheld the standards of this commercial airline. Elena's gaze did not waver. You upheld a system designed to exclude. Marcus pressed a final command. A confidential training document appeared on the screen. An internal guidance. Manual circulated among premium cabin staff. Premium service culture. Internal guidance. Highlighted passages illuminated the screen. crew discretion should be exercised to preserve the luxury atmosphere of the first-class cabin. Passengers whose presentation may disrupt the premium experience should be managed discreetly. Comfort-related concerns should be documented to justify service adjustments. A stunned silence enveloped the boardroom. Victoria Langley's voice faltered. This is not an official policy. No, Marcus said calmly. It is something far more dangerous, an unwritten system disguised as discretion. Elena stepped forward. A system that uses perception as a weapon and procedure as a shield. Claire Whitmore's composure cracked. You're misinterpreting internal guidance. Are we? Elena asked softly. She turned to the screen, highlighting a final document, an affidavit from Daniel Hargrove and testimony from an internal service trainer. They confirm that service denial, complaint shaping, and passenger relocation were used to preserve the illusion of luxury, Elena said, not to ensure safety, but to enforce exclusion. The weight of the revelation settled heavily over the room. The legal counsel rose slowly, his voice grave. If these documents are authentic, they expose systemic misconduct and potential liability at the highest level. Victoria Langley's expression hardened. This is a deliberate attack on the airline's reputation. Marcus met her gaze calmly. No, Ms. Langley, this is a revelation of truth. He paused, allowing the silence to speak. Our journey aboard flight NA217 was not random, he continued. It was part of a confidential evaluation authorized under our governance authority. We had received prior reports suggesting discriminatory practices within the premium service division. Elena's voice was steady. Your crew did not merely remove passengers. They validated those warnings. Claire Whitmore's voice trembled. You staged this? Marcus shook his head gently. No, we observed, and your system revealed itself. The boardroom erupted in murmurs. Executives exchanged uneasy glances. Compliance officers reviewed documents with mounting alarm. The pack, legal, PR, and enforcement, began to fracture under the weight of undeniable evidence. One board member spoke hesitantly. If this becomes public, the consequences will be catastrophic. Another nodded. Regulatory investigations, financial exposure, reputational collapse. The legal counsel closed the dossier with finality. We have no defensible position. An immediate internal investigation and executive suspension are required. Victoria Langley's composure faltered. This is unacceptable. It is unavoidable, the counsel replied firmly. Claire Whitmore's voice trembled as she rose. I followed orders. I upheld the standards of this airline. Marcus regarded her quietly. You upheld a story, and now the truth has replaced it. For nothing is hidden that will not be disclosed, nor concealed that will not be brought out into the open. Luke 8:17. The words settled over the room like a solemn verdict. Elena spoke softly. Truth does not seek revenge. It seeks revelation. Silence returned to the boardroom, heavier than before. Marcus gathered his documents calmly. Our intention is not to destroy this airline, he said. It is to restore integrity, implement transparent reforms, enforce equitable service standards, and establish independent oversight. And we will support the process. The chairman of the board nodded solemnly. You have our full cooperation. Victoria Langley lowered her gaze, her authority dissolving under the weight of consequence. Claire Whitmore stood motionless, her composure shattered. The pack had turned on itself. The system had been exposed, and there was no escape. Marcus and Elena turned toward the door, their dignity intact. As they stepped into the corridor, sunlight poured through the windows, illuminating the path ahead. Elena exhaled softly. It's over. Marcus shook his head gently. No, it's only begun. Behind them, the boardroom doors closed, sealing the beginning of an investigation that would reshape the airline's future. Outside, the London skyline stretched beneath a clearing sky, radiant with possibility. The truth has shattered the illusion of prestige, and the system stands exposed. Executives face suspension, investigations loom, and the airline's future hangs in the balance. But justice is not complete. The press conference hall at Northbridge Atlantic Airways was filled with quiet anticipation. Cameras flashed beneath the soft glow of studio lights, and journalists from across Europe and the United States waited in silence. At the center of the stage stood a podium bearing the airline's emblem, once a symbol of prestige, now a reminder of accountability. Marcus and Elena Vance sat calmly in the front row, their presence composed and dignified. Behind them, representatives from regulatory agencies and civil aviation authorities observed with solemn attention. The atmosphere was not triumphant, but resolute, grounded in the weight of truth. The chairman of the board approached the podium, his expression grave. He adjusted the microphone, his voice steady but subdued. "Ladies and gentlemen, Northbridge Atlantic Airways acknowledges the findings of the independent investigation into the events aboard Flight NA217. The evidence has revealed serious procedural failures and a breach of our commitment to equitable service. Today, we accept responsibility." A hush fell across the room. In the interest of justice and integrity, the airline has entered into a comprehensive settlement agreement with Mr. and Mrs. Marcus and Elena Vance. This agreement includes restitution, institutional reforms, and the establishment of an independent oversight council to ensure transparency and equality across all operations. The chairman paused, then continued with solemn sincerity. "On behalf of Northbridge Atlantic Airways, I offer a formal executive apology to the Vance family. We deeply regret the humiliation and injustice they endured. Their dignity should never have been questioned." Cameras flashed as reporters captured the moment. Marcus inclined his head respectfully, while Elena's expression remained serene. Their silence carried more power than any speech, a quiet affirmation that truth required no embellishment. The chairman continued, his voice firm. "This moment marks a turning point in our commitment to brand accountability. We recognize that prestige is not defined by luxury, but by integrity. Our renewed approach to reputation management will prioritize transparency, inclusivity, and respect for all passengers." Behind him, a screen illuminated with the airline's new charter of ethical service, clear, uncompromising, and public. Among the reforms were mandatory bias awareness training, revised airline policy standards, and the creation of an independent passenger rights commission. The changes were not symbolic, they were systemic. As the press conference concluded, the chairman stepped aside, inviting Marcus and Elena to speak. Marcus rose gracefully and approached the podium, his presence commanding yet humble. "We did not seek retribution," he said calmly. "We sought truth, and truth, when revealed, does not destroy, it restores." He glanced toward Elena, who joined him at the podium. "This experience was painful," she said softly, "but it has become a catalyst for change. May this moment remind us that dignity is not granted by privilege. It is inherent in every human being." The audience remained silent, moved by the quiet strength of their words. Outside the headquarters, sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the skyline in warm gold. Marcus and Elena stepped onto the pavement together, pausing to look back at the building that had once symbolized injustice, and now stood as a testament to reform. "Elena," Marcus said gently, "justice is not measured by victory, but by what it restores." She smiled, her eyes reflecting the light of a new beginning. And today, it restored dignity. Hand in hand, they walked forward into the city, their legacy not written in power, but in truth. The system had been exposed, the reckoning had come, and from its ashes, integrity endured. Marcus and Elena Vance embody quiet strength, dignity, and unwavering moral clarity. They did not rely on status or authority to defend themselves, but trusted in truth and integrity. Their calm endurance transformed humiliation into justice, proving that real power lies not in dominance, but in character. In contrast, Claire Whitmore and Victoria Langley represent a system blinded by perception and prestige. Their actions were not driven by personal hatred alone, but by a culture that valued appearance over humanity. Through them, we see how institutions can perpetuate injustice when accountability is absent. Yet their downfall serves as a necessary reckoning, a reminder that systems must evolve when confronted with truth. This story is more than a tale of injustice. It is a reflection of the choices we face in our daily lives. It calls us to stand against discrimination, to uphold dignity, and to challenge systems that fail to honor humanity. Through courage and perseverance, we can transform adversity into progress and inspire meaningful change for a better, healthier, safer, and happier world. In our own journeys, we may encounter moments of humiliation, misunderstanding, or unfair judgment. Yet faith reminds us that justice unfolds in its time, and truth cannot remain hidden forever. He has shown you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Micah 6:8. This story encourages us to live with compassion, integrity, and humility, trusting that every act of righteousness contributes to a legacy of hope. May we carry these lessons into our daily lives, honoring God through our actions and uplifting others with dignity and grace. If this story moved you, inspired reflection, or reminded you of the power of truth and resilience, please like, share, and subscribe. Stay with Black Resilience Stories for more cinematic journeys that celebrate justice, faith, and the enduring strength of the human spirit.